Hey guys, Jane here. In the month of November, I DNF'd 3 books and I read 9 books. So let's talk about it.
Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page, capturing life as soft spoken.
All right, so let us start with the DNFs. And I did want to say, I think I had a little more DNFs this month than I maybe normally do. And part of it is because I was participating in Nonfiction November. I do enjoy nonfiction books, but sometimes nonfiction, if they don't grab me quite right, I'm a lot quicker to DNF those than a fictional book that's telling me a story. So the first DNF I had this month was Of Dice and Men. This is about D&D, and I didn't get very far in it. It just wasn't hitting right for me. I play D&D. I'm a recently new D&D player, actually, and I really enjoy D&D, so I really thought I was going to love this book. And I can't even explain to you what really wasn't working. I got bored. And so I ended up putting it down and not wanting to pick it back up. And I thought, this isn't working. Maybe I am not far enough in playing D&D or not serious enough to appreciate all this. He does kind of do it like information about D&D and D&D players and the culture of it, and then also like an internal game that him and his friends are playing. Um, so I don't know if it was a format issue, but I was really disappointed because I really wanted to love this. And like I said, it wasn't bad. I think it could be right for somebody else. It just wasn't right for me. The next book I DNF'd was Unsolved Victorian Murders. All right, so this goes over different unsolved Victorian murders, as the name suggests. I think my main issue with this book is the writing is super dry. I got through, I don't know, maybe half of the cases, and I was really bored. It's very factual. It is very, here is what happened. Here's what we know. But I think I needed it more readable. It really, for me, just wasn't super readable. And I felt like it was very difficult to sift through. And I was kind of just disappointed in that. Like, I just want to read a book and have a good time. I didn't want it to be so dense. And this really felt quite dense to me. The next book I DNF'd was an audiobook. It was a very short audiobook. And it's called What the Animals Taught Me. And I think I just, in this case, wasn't jiving with the writer. I it is very she has a very specific way of looking at the world, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but it just wasn't a view that I was super comfortable with. For instance, like she didn't want to do certain elements of typical horse training because she didn't think it was kind to the horses. And like I don't own horses, I don't know. But I do know that as I've read other books about animals, sometimes animals don't communicate the same way humans do. And I think some of the things that I was frustrated with her is she is very against the grain in things and she's doing things very differently. And that may be fine. And she may even have valid points, but it felt like she was coming from it at it from a place of like, putting her human feelings on these animals and not necessarily considering how the animals perceiving things maybe. I just I didn't jive with the author, and so I ended up deciding I didn't want to finish the book even though it's quite short. Now, it may be for you, it just wasn't for me. So, those were the 3 books I DNF'd in the month. Let's talk about the ones I read. Now, I will tell you not all of these were nonfiction, about half of them are. I decided to kind of break up my nonfiction and fiction. I like nonfiction, but not enough to like read it all month. And if you are not familiar with Nonfiction November, it is hosted. I follow a book olive, and she's the one that was hosting it. I know she's hosting it with other people, but she's the one that I was following that got me into Nonfiction November. So that's where it comes from. And she is a big nonfiction reader, which is awesome. I like nonfiction, but I don't love it. So, all right. The first book I read was not a nonfiction. I think I'll go through the fiction and nonfiction separately. I think that would probably be the easiest for you guys. All right. So the first one was Beauty and the Beast Girl. This is a manga about a blind girl who is out in the forest, and she meets a recluse there who appears monstrous. But of course, she's blind, she can't see it, and they develop a connection. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Manga is really hit or miss for me. I've been trying to read more of it because my daughter's really into it, and I generally rate these a little more lightly, I guess, than I would a more serious book. So I understood this, I knew what was going on, and I had a good time with it, and so I gave it a 4, because for me, that is above average for a manga. Your mileage may vary, and I don't know if I'm going to pick up more of the series. It was fine, but I didn't necessarily feel like I needed to go out and grab book 2. It was fine. All right, the next book I read was a graphic novel, and that was Eve, and this is volume 1. This is about a girl who wakes up and finds that she has been more or less raised in this laboratory, and the world is in a really bad place. There has been some destruction of land, there has been like a virus thing going on, and she is kind of tasked with saving the world with her robot companion. I also gave this a 4 out of 5. I did really enjoy this though, and I am planning on reading more in this series. It is interesting. I love the art. I thought that was very pretty. I liked the big questions and things that we're talking about and the conversations that this book brings. And overall, I just had a really good time with it. The next book I read was Christine by Stephen King. All right, so that was one that I started for October, a spooky read, and I did the audiobook version. And it took me a while to get through it because Stephen King's books are just all long. But I really enjoyed Christine, and I would put it like in the upper levels of the Kings that I've read. So I would say the Kings that I have really, really enjoyed. I really love Pet Sematary. I really love Misery. I really loved 1922, which I read last month. And this is probably up there. I really enjoyed it. I had a couple moments where I really felt terror, which isn't something I normally feel with the King. I did maybe a little bit with Cujo. And I loved Cujo. I just thought Cujo was very meandering at times. So even though I really liked Cujo a lot, the main plot, I felt it meandered too much to like be in the top level of, oh my gosh, these books are amazing. So Christine, for those who don't know, is about a car. So this guy who is kind of nerdy, and he's very much like a people pleaser to his parents. He sees this used car, this car that has seen better days, and he decides to buy it with the intent to repair it because it's love at first sight with this car. And things are not what they seem and go very badly, and I can't really tell you what happens without spoilers, but I loved it. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. For a king, that's pretty good. I don't think I've ever given a king a 5, so a 4 out of 5 is really good for me for king because sometimes he's so hit and miss with me. But I really had a good time with Christine. It was pretty good paced, actually, for a king, which is my main complaint about king sometimes, is that he tends to not be great paced. This one, I felt like it kept moving. I didn't have any places in the audiobook where I really felt like, come on, let's do this. I was initially a little bit confused by what was happening, but I think as the book progressed, we got a pretty good idea of what we're supposed to be believing is happening, and I really thought that worked well. Um, and it was just, it was kind of, it was kind of horrific, but in a good way. I think for me, especially, there were a couple scenes that I was just like, oh, that could really happen, and that is terrifying. So I had a good time with Christine. The last fiction book I read for the month was The True Love Experiment. And this is by Christina Lauren. And this is also one that I did as an audiobook. So I rated it 4 stars, but I had a lot of issues with it. So I loved the concept of this book. So we have a romance author who is going to be going on this like bachelorette dating show type thing. But the premise is that there is a technology that can match people based on their DNA. So she and the guys on the show are going to be taking these DNA tests, and then she's going to go on dates with these guys, and the viewers are going to vote off who they don't think she has chemistry with, who they don't think is her true love match, and then see at the end if the person that they think is her true love match is her match on paper through this experiment thing. The plot twist is, and of course we know this the minute we start reading the book, is that she does not fall in love with any of the boys on the show. She instead falls in love with the producer. This dude is awesome. I really loved Connor. That's the guy's name. He is a divorced dad and really involved with his daughter. So I loved like a really good show of a healthy dynamic of co-parenting. But something we don't see a lot. A lot of times we see a lot of like friction and frustration and in co-parenting situations, and I am in a co-parenting situation for my daughters, and we try really hard to be healthy and like these people were way more like friendly and involved with each other in a good way than like even I am. Like I'm on pretty good terms with my ex and his wife, but like these people in the book, they knocked it out of the park. So I really loved Connor. I thought he was a great character. I thought he was a complex character. And just I really was rooting for him from the get-go. I also love the general vibe of, here's a romance author, so there's a lot of like really fun like catering to the romance audience. So for instance, the author, her name is Fizzy. She, before they start filming, gives this list of like, I want these archetypes for the guy. So I want you to pick a certain number of these archetypes, and those are the ones that you are going to bring onto the show. And he's like, what does this even mean? And so, like, as the romance reader, we know what like a DILF is. And so there was things like a Cinnabon and a DILF and a second chance and a vampire and a bad boy. And of course, this producer who's never read a romance book in his life is like, I don't even know what these words mean, let alone how to get this for you. So I loved a lot of that stuff. I didn't love Fizzy. And I will say that for me, I didn't necessarily there was 2 narrators, a boy and a girl. Connor's narrator, oh, lovely. I loved him. Fizzy's narrator, I didn't quite jive with. I don't think they did a bad job. They just didn't work for me. And I think that compiled the fact that I didn't really like Fizzy very much as a character. She just was very not meshing with me. The other thing that I had an issue with is we all know in romance there's third act breakups. This one also had a third act breakup because that's what you do. And this third act breakup, I don't think it was poorly done, but it didn't work for me. I didn't enjoy it. I liked the reconciliation, and I think it was a beautiful, complex reason for them to have the breakup, and it was a very human, very realistic thing. But I think for me, like, I want fun escapist fiction, and maybe we stepped out of the fun escapist fiction where the rest of the book is very much fun escapist fiction. So, it is moderately spicy. There's like 2 or 3 scenes. It's very like intense, but like I didn't have a problem with any of that. That was great. The spice was great. The humor was great. The plot was great. Connor was great. Fizzy not so much, and I had a real issue with the third act breakup. But overall, it was a good book. Glad I read it. And I do like Christina Lauren. I thought when I first started reading her books that she was going to be like an auto buy for me, like one of my favorites. And she may still get there. But as I've read a few more of her books, then my first that I read from her was Autobiography, and it was a 5 out of 5, and I just loved it. But then I read a couple others that were like 3 stars. This was a good one. This was like one of the higher ones that I've read from her. So she's an author I really like, but like sometimes she's kind of hit or miss for me too. All right, so that was all the fiction I read. So let's get to our nonfiction. Now, there were 4 prompts, and I don't know that I actually, maybe I hit the prompts, maybe not. We can decide. But the prompts were fraud, capital, web, and display. So, the first book is the one I'm going to be using for fraud, and that is Homicide. It is a graphic novel. My understanding is there was a journalist who followed the Baltimore Police Department and was like going through what was going on with their crimes and stuff, and made it into, like, wrote a book about it that was made into a TV show. And this is a graphic novel from that. I'm trying to see if what I rated this. Oh, that's what I thought. Okay, this is volume 1. I didn't read volume 2, and I don't think I'm going to. I ended up rating this a 3-star. There's some stuff in it that hasn't aged well, and for me, I think it's a very bleak, dark, and I mean, with the title Homicide, like, I expect that, right? But I didn't really feel a sense of fulfillment afterwards. A lot of the cases are not solved in this, so we don't really get all the information. Maybe they're solved in book 2, but I also kind of wonder if they're just not solved, because kind of the point is, at least it seems to be, this dark, dire, it's a whole bad situation. Like, these homicide detectives, they have a board where they solved cases are in black, and then like open cases are in red, and there's just all the red. And there's a lot of like, people who read mysteries think that we solve crimes this way, but in reality, that's not how you solve a crime, because blah, blah, blah. And so I didn't think this was bad. It wasn't for me. It wasn't hitting right with me. And I don't think I'm going to continue it, but it was an interesting, though bleak, look at police work in Baltimore in the, I want to say 70s, 80s, question mark. But yeah, it didn't quite hit how I wanted it to hit. Okay, so the next one was Capital. Capital, I would say this is a loose interpretation of Capital, because I'm looking at it from like the healthcare system. It's a healthcare related book, being very for-profit driven these days. And that doesn't super come into this book, a little bit, but not a lot. So, and that book is Critical Care. This is the memoir of a nurse. She was an English professor, and then she went back to college to become a nurse, and she worked in an inpatient oncology unit. Now, I, up until very recently, worked at an outpatient um, chemotherapy clinic. So I recently switched jobs because oncology is great, but man, is it heartbreaking, and man, is it easy to feel burned out. And there were a lot of other reasons that I left. It wasn't those things, but I'm definitely like, now that I'm not there, dealing with a lot more of the emotions of debriefing or whatever you would call it, to kind of like deal with some of the trauma of working with unfortunately very ill patients. And I'm not a nurse. I was doing clerical work, but still you are having exposure to all kinds of rough things. I really loved this book. I really related hard to it because of, you know, what she does versus what I was doing. Some of the situations were kind of similar to things that I had seen or experienced with people, and I just really enjoyed most of this. I ended up giving it a 4 star. I did think it wasn't as focused as I would have liked it to be in some places, and also like there's a lot of veering off into things that I didn't really care about. Like, she at one point breaks her foot. She has some like drama with some of the nurses on one unit and has to move to a different unit. There's just stuff. And while that's interesting enough, like I was there for the patient stuff. And so I really enjoyed this, but I probably largely enjoyed it because of my own experience in working in oncology and my own experience of like being able to see that in this from obviously a different perspective. Because as I said, she's a nurse, I'm not a nurse, but I really did enjoy it. But like I said, healthcare, one of the challenges, and one of the challenges even a clerical person faces, is fighting the insurance companies to get care for our patients. And unfortunately, like it costs money to care for patients. If we want to keep our doors open, we have to make sure that we are getting paid for these services by the insurance companies. And that can be a slippery slope. So that's why I chose this for capital, even though that might be questionable. But healthcare, unfortunately, runs on money. The next one is my prompt for web, and that is Musings of a Horse Farm Corgi. And this book, it was so cute. I really enjoyed it. This is by a local author. So I met this author at a book event and bought this book from her. I will say, to call it nonfiction, I'm not sure. I would say this is kind of this is closer to fiction than nonfiction, but it is the story of this dog. What is his name? Beamer. I knew it was a B. I thought it was Boomer for a second. This dog. And they are a fluffy corgi. So the story is told from Beamer's perspective, which is one reason that I say, to call it nonfiction is probably kind of questionable. But it is the story from the eyes of the dog of this lady's corgi. So she had wanted a corgi and this particular coloring of corgi and gone to a breeder, and the breeder said, we have this dog and he's really friendly, he's a really great dog, but he's a fluffy, so he doesn't meet show standards, he can't be bred, so he could do like agility stuff, but just know that. And apparently like farmers used to like kill dogs like this because their coat made them not really useful as a corgi for the work that they did, and of course not show standard, not breed. What do you do with a puppy like this? Well, she took it to work on her horse farm, and it was just a really cute and really engaging story of, about this dog and his life with her. Again, is it really nonfiction? No, I don't think it was, but it was a good time, and the author was super nice when I met her, and I really appreciated that. I did end up giving it 4 stars because it was a lot of fun to read. My dad has a Corgi also. So like I saw a little bit of that Corgi personality in the character of the book. So I would not say don't read this. Absolutely read it. If you love dogs, if you like really enjoy corgis, this is a great book. It's just, again, it's very much from the dog's point of view, and I'm not sure that we could call it nonfiction because we're getting it all from the dog. The last book is what I'm going to use for display. And again, this is kind of like, and a book Olive said, we didn't have to be super literal. So I read Banned Book Club. This is a story about a girl in South Korea during 1983, and her parents are kind of poor. They own a restaurant, and she and them have kind of saved up enough for her to go to college. Her mom doesn't really want her to go, but her dad does. So she goes to college and she just wants her education. I think she's an English major. And she gets drawn into this very political world of people fighting against the government, including this banned book club where they are reading books that are outlawed in South Korea at the time. And it is really about the different things happening, different people trying to show their desires for the government. And like one day she's trying to go to school and there's all these protests happening, and the other students are getting mad when she does become a little political because they're like, we just want to go to school. But then also, like, so much is political if you look at it. Like in the literature class, they are talking about, Shakespeare, and Shakespeare is political. The like teacher draws some inferences to their situation of the plays that they're reading and being like, yeah, this stuff is still happening in our world. We're just talking about it through Shakespeare, but you can kind of understand. Or there's a dance group she tries to join, and also they're finding that like these old dances, these 900-year-old dances, are basically the same stories of the government overreaching. And it was a really fascinating perspective on that. I really, really enjoyed it. This is a graphic novel again. There was a lot of graphic novels I wanted to read this month, but it was also NaNoWriMo, and so reading was kind of less of a priority. I did not hit 50,000 words for anybody who happened to be invested in NaNoWriMo. Because I also switched jobs and had to do job training, and it just was a crazy month. But needless to say, there was a lot of graphic novels. This is one of them, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I did find that in a couple places it was confusing, and I wasn't entirely sure about certain things, but overall, I had a really good time. So, that was my month of reading. What did you read this month? Answer in the comments below, especially if it was nonfiction November. If you did the nonfiction November, what did you have for your different books for the prompts? All right, guys, this has been Jane. See you next time. Bye.